Hi, Sally.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Well, I'm fine. Very excited about this. It's great that you've been able to organize it.
Thank you. Yes, me too. Honestly, it's been on my mind to do for a long time. And I
Yeah,
think what better time than 2024 when it's been extra challenging, I should say.
I think I have to say, in the 10 years I've been coaching, I've never had a May as quiet as this.
Yeah, it's kind of
Traditionally, May is
unbelievable.
quiet anyhow, but I mean, this is I'm not even in COVID was I as quiet as this.
Right, yeah. So
And I just think a lot of it is to do with uncertainty over all the visa changes.
absolutely, it
Mm,
absolutely
mm,
is. Sorry, I'm
mm,
just trying to
mm.
go back. So what I might ask you to do, Sally, if it's okay, while I wait for the other panel members, is just, well, actually it's super quiet where you are, so you don't need to mute, but I'll just kick start the session. Hi, Valeria. Hi, Valeria.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, how
Hi.
are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
Good. I'm warm. It's very, I'm not complaining, but I'm very warm.
I have AC on because it's I know it's gonna get heated.
Oh, I love
I
that.
did have the hi Valeria, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Sally.
Oh,
I was did have the windows open to try and cool down, but actually I've shut them because I didn't want the disruption of any outside noise.
I have a window open, so if there's any noise disturbance
Yeah.
during the session, just please let me know. So I'll just get started. I think Gina might join us at the beginning or slightly later. That's absolutely fine. So thank you for participating in today's panel discussion event. So the topic is understanding international students' employability needs, which as briefly mentioned just now with Sally, it's a very challenging time, I think, to be an international student and graduate, but also to work with this community and to support them, to guide them through the various visa policy changes, the job market and the changes there. So I just felt this would be a really good time for people who have first-hand experience working closely with international students and graduates to share insights, experiences, maybe offer some practical, suggestions and solutions, offer a bit of reassurance as well. So this session, in case you're kind of wondering who it's targeted at, a variety. So of course, international students attending today, welcome. Hopefully you'll learn a little bit more about how to navigate the challenges of securing a visa-sponsored graduate job. You'll also hopefully be able to understand how to gain support from your university as well, because they are here to support you. So kind of engaging with those staff members. Also understanding employers, their perspective and what they have to think about, what they have to go through. It might also help you to understand what it is that you have to do together in order for you to secure a role. Um, and also then, so careers teams at universities, I'm hoping this session is going to be valuable just to highlight some of the experiences and insights that we can share about this very unique and wonderful community. In case you may not have had much, involvement with international students, or you're doing a few touch points, but you'd like to do more, this would be, perfect, hopefully, for you. Gina, welcome to the panel. Lovely to see you.
Hi.
Hi. Um, so I'm recording the session. If during this session there are any issues with the presentation, with the sound, please just type something into the chat. So I've had some internet issues over the last couple of days and my window's open, so there might be some audio from outside. So just raise it if it's affecting the presentation. Okay, so let's get started. There's a huge amount to cover, but I have a lovely panel with me to help. So I thought it would be helpful to do some introductions. I'm going to start with myself. So my name is 𝐚𝐿𝐼𝐧𝐻𝐸 and I am the founder of Grad Careers Coach. So our organisation has been helping international students and graduates to secure visa-sponsored roles in the UK for just over 8 years. And in that time, we faced many changes and hurdles in the pandemic. 2024 has been particularly difficult. Lots of new challenges, I should say. And so this is, one of the reasons I wanted to hold this event, just to navigate this market and this challenging time together. I'm now going to ask Valeria to introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Annika, again for this event and for inviting me. My name is Valeria 𝐸𝐸, and I'm an ex-international student, graduated from University of Nottingham 2014, and I had to navigate this journey myself back in the day, and it felt difficult, it felt challenging, even though there was no graduate visa. The social media days were not as big where you can find information easily. I feel that now it's much better in that sense. And I did secure my first job in HR, an investment bank on a graduate scheme where I spent several years. And in the last 4 years, I've been doing the really quite similar things to Annika, helping international students through coaching or different services, mainly online courses, webinars, group sessions online. And I completely second what Annika said, that this year has been very challenging. Surprisingly, I thought it's going to get easier with a graduate visa, with all the information available, but this year has been very difficult for my clients. I'm not sure what factors, and there are different factors that come in, I think mainly the immigration climate, post-Brexit, post-pandemic, post everything. And I'm so glad that we can come together and share our knowledge.
Thank you, Valeria. Sally, would you like to just give us a little bit of your interesting and varied background?
Absolutely, and I'd quite like to echo what Valeria said about some of the difficulties facing international students this year. I've been coaching international students now for 10 years, helping them get visa-sponsored jobs across a wide range of industries and helping them to pursue under visa sponsorship a very wide range of careers. I work on a freelance basis for some of the coaching companies, and I also work privately for my own clients. And I call myself not just a careers coach, but a cross-cultural careers coach, because I think a lot of what we're doing is helping international students cross that cultural divide to understand what international companies are looking for to help them get jobs. And I've spent nearly 20 years living and working in various parts of Asia, and I feel I've got a lot of the cross-cultural understanding as well as the real knowledge of knowing what international companies are looking for to help international students get jobs. My background, though, is a little bit different because I originally trained at the BBC, and I spent the greater part of my career working as a broadcast journalist, both for radio and television. So I feel I've got quite a lot of background to help students, and I'm really happy to be taking part in this panel discussion today. I think it's going to be a very valuable and opportune time to discuss some of the challenges that international students are facing at the moment, and maybe what we can do as a group to help them overcome them. So thanks so much, Annika, for organising this. It's my absolute pleasure to take part today.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to have you, and you can see the media training because you're such a polished speaker. It's wonderful.
About that.
Over to you, Gina. Hi again, and please do introduce yourself.
Hi, Annika. Thank you for inviting me today to be part of this panel. I am Gina 𝐔𝐬𝐈𝐧𝐻𝑒𝐸. I am an immigration lawyer, I have been working in the immigration law advice space for the past 20 years. In that time, I've seen a lot of changes. So one thing that is constant is that things are changing all the time. Immigration law is a very politically sensitive area of topic. Things change very quickly, very little notice of any changes happening, and you're just left with dealing with lots of anxious clients, whether they be businesses, individuals, employers. So I advise individuals and employers across various sectors on the way they can best navigate the UK immigration rules. I help employers with things such as compliance, helping them with the whole sponsorship license process. And I work with individuals as well on the other side, who in some cases are not often supported by the employers if they're making the applications themselves. So I help them to navigate the whole system, and also provide ongoing support even after the case ends.
Thank you, Gina. I think that's a very unique perspective because you're helping both sides to navigate the process. So that will be very interesting to hear from you throughout the session about strategies that both sides can use to make the process a little easier. Okay. So today's discussion is going to center around 4 themes. Quite ambitious, because I think you could probably do a session on each one of these, and it's going to be difficult to know when to move on. But I just wanted to tackle as many sides of this as possible, and allow whoever's attending today or watching the recording to be able to take away something that they can think about or action. And I think in today's current climate, and especially with things that have been written in the media about international students recently, some not so positive, poor journalism going on, I really wanted to start with humanizing the international student experience and just remembering that these are individuals with unique stories, aspirations, hopes, dreams, reasons for wanting to study here, reasons for wanting to continue to be here and to secure meaningful employment in the UK. So before even moving on to employability, I just wanted to focus on their experience, because it actually does shape their prospects as well. So I think this would be just a good place to start. And there are so many different elements that make up the international student experience. These are just some. So we're really touching upon a very small, a few key areas. But I think it's important to set the scene and to really dig deep into what they're facing when they come and study here. So I've kind of mentioned expectation versus reality. There's such a big shock often from this community about what they expect, life as a student in the UK to look like, and then often the kind of brutal reality of being a student here. So with the panel, we'll discuss a little bit more about that in detail. Cultural differences. So Sally, I'm sure you can really draw on some of your experience in your training to talk about these cultural differences and how that they affect this community. Feeling like outsiders, even though they're here, they might not have a network. They are kind of excluded often from certain spaces, I suppose, in university, or at least that's how they feel. Loneliness and mental health, this obviously affects domestic students as well, but it's so much more acute with international students who are so far away from their family, from their support network, from their friends, and it has a direct impact on how they thrive in their studies and beyond. And then pressures as well. It's very easy to kind of assume that international students are very financially stable. It's just not always the case. Majority of my students, you know, are earning alongside their studies. You know, they're under financial pressures. There's stories of bed sharing and not able to afford rent, or having to pay rent 1 year in advance, you know, just some crazy stories. So it's just remembering that this is the case and highlighting some of those experiences. And family pressures as well. That's not really talked about, but that's a big pressure that they face. In fact, I do a lot of calls with parents who don't always appreciate how difficult it is to navigate being a student, let alone looking for a visa-sponsored job here, you know, and just having a master's isn't necessarily going to enable you to just walk into a company. You know, it's so challenging. So there is a lot of different areas here, but I guess, could we start with you, Valeria? Do you want to just share some of your insights into, you know, the international student experience and what you think that looks like?
Oh, thank you for highlighting this important topic. And I like that we started with humanizing the experience in the first instance. Starting from personal experience, I felt that pressure myself, even though my family is very supportive. First of all, your family looks out for you and obviously care about what you know, first of all, your education, your career goals, and they might be really worried for you, but they haven't been through the process themselves. So you get a lot of advice from people that haven't been through the process, or might have unrealistic expectations from the students, because they think if you went to the top university or you went to a degree, you got good grades, that's it, you sorted out. But unfortunately, there's just one piece to a successful career in the UK. So obviously pressures are there. It's being alone in a country where you have no one to go to if you get sick, if you got kicked out from rent, if you're not paying rent, you don't have any connections, there is no family friend that worked in a particular company or knows that you can go to and talk about your careers. And obviously language barriers, being embarrassed about your accent, being embarrassed of saying the wrong saying. This is a big personal thing that I have faced. There is some biases from everyone. I mean, in every country there is a bias. There is a bias in every situation, just because that's how people function. But obviously there is certain misconceptions. If you don't hang out with other internationals or with British people, that you don't want to integrate. But sometimes it's just hard because you might be shy, or you might not be confident, you don't know what to say, you might be embarrassed. Second thing is obviously some biases from employers, or even I personally faced a bias from immigration border officer, who, once I got my tier 2 visa, I was on the border showing my visa, that was, I think, a BRP card, and he asked me, how did you get this job? Does your dad know someone? This was the actual immigration officer at the border at the airport asked me this question. So can you imagine if the officers that are trained to ask these questions ask you that you as an immigrant, you can't get a high-paying job after a degree? How would other people in the industry might perceive you? So that's some of the things that I personally faced. But I'm still very, very grateful for the UK and the opportunities I got, and most of the people were very, very welcoming. And I think that I tell international students, don't be afraid. You will be judged by your performance, you'll be judged by your contribution, not by your accent, where you come from, or maybe some of the cultural mistakes that you might make in your journey, because it's a learning opportunity. But if you are working with international students, you have to realize that if we are maybe more quiet, or we might feel like not as wanting to integrate, it just could be just lack of confidence at this at times. And also, yes, if you can afford a master's in the UK. It doesn't mean that you're rich, you're sorted out. It might be just one chance you're taking for your career, for your development, and quite often that could be a loan from your own home country that adds extra pressure. And this is just some of the aspects that I think are important to keep in mind, that everyone has their own background and might be facing some difficulties despite looking and studying at a UK university. Thank you.
Thank you, Valeria. That's a really good points you raised. It's really nice to have that personal insight as well. And you talk about accent, you talk about making mistakes. You know, it's just really important to remember these fears and these extra challenges that this community has. Thank you. Sally, what would you say are the main differences between international students' expectations and their reality, and also maybe some of the kind of the issues around cultural differences that come up?
Yeah, I think it was really helpful hearing firsthand from Valeria, you know, your own experience of coming here as an international student. And I think it's really important to highlight and to really understand that from a first-hand account. I think I can divide the international students, you know, quite crudely into two groups. I think the first group are the people who have come here maybe to do undergraduate studies straight from school in their own country, or straight to do a master's from having done an undergraduate degree in their own country. And those who have maybe done an undergraduate degree in their own country, have worked for maybe 4 or 5 years to save up, and then come here to do a master's. And I think the difficulties that those two groups face, there's some overlap, but I also think there's some difference. I think for the students who are coming here straight from school or straight from university without any kind of broader life experience, really have a very, well, I think Valeria underlined a lot of the problems they're having. And I would say that you mentioned the word integration. I think integration is huge. And a lot of these people are being sponsored to come here by their families. And therefore, there's a lot of pressure and a lot of expectation on them to succeed and achieve at the end. And that achievement is sort of seen by getting a job here after they graduate. So that puts even more pressure. And the difficulty that I think the students who are more mature students who are coming here, they are often self-paying, they're struggling a lot financially. I think 𝐶𝐬𝐬𝐢, you highlighted those difficulties they face. A lot of them are working at the same time as studying, and they're trying to balance and juggle their lives. And, you know, they're finding it really very, very tough. I think the main problem is two things. First of all, is really trying to integrate. And again, Valeria, you highlighted this, but so many of the international students I coach tend to stay in their own groups from their own nationalities and really don't have the confidence to integrate into university life to make the most of it. Taking part in societies, taking part in university activities, and seizing that opportunity of of what they're being offered. So I think that's the main problem for those of that. Also doesn't help with language skills. And I think that is also a problem, because if you're not integrating, you're not developing the professional language skills that you may need to get through that job recruitment process. I think there's another very big problem that these students face, and that is a lot of these students who come from their own countries have been in an education system which is very prescriptive. And they come here to university and it's very different. They're having to work a lot on their own. They're having to do their own research. They're having to use their own initiative. And for many students, this is also a huge, they've got to adapt to this. And a lot of them find that very difficult. And then on top of that, particularly if you're coming here just for a master's course and you want to get a job at the end of it, you've got this terrible time pressure of understanding how to manage your time, because you can't wait till you graduate, as we all know, to apply for a job. The job recruitment process starts in the autumn when they arrive here. And if you're a master's student, you need to move straight away to applying for those jobs which are starting a year later. So you're coming here, you've got all those cultural adjustments which, you know, have already been highlighted. You've got the adapting to the new methods of working, the studies and all the pressure of work. And on top of that, you've got to understand the job recruitment process. And I think the key problem that international students face, and we could perhaps come on to this, is really understanding what international companies look for when they when they're recruiting, because it's often very different from what companies are looking for when they recruit in their own countries. So I think that's the juggling act and the huge limited time that they have to adapt, which I think causes a lot of problems.
Thank you, Sally. I kind of totally agree with what you said around the education system being very, very different. And I wonder how international students could be prepared better to thrive in a UK university environment. So I think Valeria and we had this discussion, didn't we, a few weeks ago, where you said it really well, but the UK university system is more individualistic, and perhaps in you know, a home country it would be more community and more collective. You know, it's a completely different kind of support. It's very hands-off in the UK, and so you have to have a lot of other qualities that you might just be learning for the first time. You know, real independence and self-discipline and getting out of your comfort zone. So it's really preparing them, building their confidence, allowing them spaces and opportunities to integrate. So there's a lot covered. So I'll thank you. And honestly, we could do a whole session around humanizing the international student experience. And it's so important, because I think you can't talk about their employability without actually really talking about this as well. So the kind of the second big theme then is understanding their employability needs. And this is where obviously most of us on the panel, this is our kind of our day-to-day, really focusing on helping international students and graduates to become employable, to become job ready, to understand what UK employers are really looking for, to adapt their CVs to the job market, to understand that it's totally different often from their home country. The recruitment process is quite unique, you know, in the UK, and it's becoming even more kind of in favour of looking at a candidate's strengths even over their skills and their degree, and even work experience. You know, it's really about an individual's strengths and potential to do well in that role. So as an international student, it's just, okay, well, how am I going to get myself job ready? How am I going to get up to speed with the market and what UK employers are really looking for in such a short space of time? So, you know, this theme, you know, this topic is to discuss that, but also to really think about how universities can enhance international students' employability. And I want to caveat that by just saying that I have been very fortunate to have worked and collaborated with university careers teams, and they do incredible work. They are focused and dedicated and really wanting to support all of their students, I should say, including international students. But what I guess the fortunate position of myself and also you guys is we can work in quite close proximity with individuals, and we can really handhold them through this process. So we can offer so much in-depth, tailored, personalized support, and it works. And we know it works because we see really good outcomes and our students, going into really exciting, rewarding careers. But the challenge for universities and university careers teams is how to do that at scale, with limited resources, with limited staff members, etc. So these are just some strategies, but I appreciate it's a balancing act between wanting to support and do more, but also being able to do that at scale, because some universities, it's thousands and thousands of international students. So it's unrealistic that you're going to be able to provide that one-to-one, but hopefully from our insights, because we do the one-to-one work, you might be able to take away some ideas on how to scale some of those strategies. Yeah, so, questions for the panel. I always ask my students, have you gone to a university? What kind of support have you received? What's working really well? So from your perspective and your conversations, what do you think international students are currently benefiting from? Like, what's working well? So, Sally, would you like to start?
Yes, I mean, I do think that the universities are adapting a lot more to the needs of international students. When I started coaching 10 years ago, there wasn't really any differential in the way careers offices helped maybe local students compared with the international student population at their universities. I think that international student population has grown. Universities obviously are very dependent on international students coming to their universities, and employability and support for international students through their careers office has now become much, much more important. And I feel that the main problem previously, which I think universities are now adjusting to, is really understanding the needs of international students. Many of them are not confident about their own abilities, and they're afraid of, well, they think that their weaknesses they think their strengths are weaknesses, when in fact they should be leveraging those strengths and not thinking negatively about themselves. For example, language skills, or the fact that they think maybe they haven't gone to a top university, or their whole perception about themselves is very negative. And really, they need to be leveraging those points to be able to sell themselves in the job recruitment process. The fact that they've come from another country and are studying here has given them language skills, given them cross-cultural understanding. These are all key factors that international companies look for in the recruitment process. And I think universities now are adapting and understanding this and giving much greater support. I think the main problem for international students is that they think that they look at the recruitment criteria according to what companies look for at home. So they think they have to go to a top university. They've got to get top grades for their subject. And they don't think that extracurricular activities or work experience is so important, when of course we all know it is. So I think a lot more of emphasis needs to be given. And I said, I think, this is now being given to international students on those power skills that international companies look for, rather than on the hard technical skills. And when I talk about power skills, we're talking about the ability to engage, work with other people, work within teams, communicate clearly, openly. And international students need the confidence to do this.
Thank you, Sally. Yeah, very useful and very interesting insights from you there. I just wanted to add as well, so there has been a progression and a real commitment to, identifying that international students have got very specific needs. Sometimes there is a kind of a pushback of, the content and the training is going to be similar. So for example, if we just take a CV workshop or CV clinic, that surely the content is going to be be the same. The content might be the same, but the audience is very different. And so how it lands is so different, and how that individual international student is going to engage with that workshop and that training is going to be hugely affected if they don't feel seen. So I find the engagement improves if there are careers events where international students know that it's for them, and that they can ask questions around, you know, can I put my work experience in my home country on my CV? You know, should I include the country? Should I include my, you know, visa status? Should I include, for some, seems to be a lot with Indian students, can I include my dozens of certifications that I've got? So I think there has to be an appreciation that you have a different audience, and it's worth, not for every single event or session, but definitely have some, you know, throughout the academic year, some events that are specifically only for international students, so that they can really get the full benefits, and ask those questions that they might otherwise have been a bit hesitant to ask if they're at an event where it's just for all students, you know. So just something to think about. Valeria, what do you think international students are currently benefiting from? Like, what do you think is working well, and how can universities you know, progress even further in support?
I think that what works well is when some courses or programs integrate practical experience or projects with current employers. This has been really, really helpful for my clients to get that experience with the UK, in an academic setting, especially for courses like MBA or masters that have a lot of international students. I feel that when these practical aspects, even if it's just a project where they can have several meetings with potential employers or people that already work in the industry, really, really help them develop those skills or improve the CV, showing that they have worked in any environment in the UK. And I feel this really strengthens their profile from a employability perspective. So I love to see those things offered as a part of the course. And I think it's probably even more valuable for international students because they didn't have a chance to do an internship before their master's or before the degree, because they didn't have that connections in the UK. So that works very well. Secondly, when they share positions, when universities share positions, clearly when they share open roles through portal or different newsletters, when they indicate whether the company is eager to sponsor or not, or indicate whether the graduate visa will be suitable for international students, and they know they can apply through that links. That's been really, really helpful. A lot of my clients say, look, the universities have shared this position, and they said the graduate visa is an option, and they jump on it, and it's so helpful. So not just sharing positions basically, but also expressing whether international students can apply, because quite often international students get a newsletter with open roles advertised by university, but most of them, they're not even eligible for because of right to work. And thirdly, I think that a lot of universities have amazing resources they pay for, such as, for example, they buy licenses to practice different assessments. They buy licenses for different job boards. But when I tell the international students, you probably have this access, check, you do. And they're like, are you sure? I'm like, yes, I know the universities buy this access, but somehow that message is lost. I'm not sure if it's international students also have to be more proactive to finding out these resources, but somehow they don't even know the benefits they have, that the money already universities have spent for. So it works well, those licenses they buy to practice different tests, when the students actually know about them. So I think that university definitely should continue paying for these resources, such as access to job boards or access to training materials, such as assessment tests. They work well, but obviously we need to make sure that the message gets to the actual student. That I think that has been very beneficial from my perspective, those three things from practical point.
Thank you, Valeria. You're absolutely right. There is a lot of resources currently. So it's marketing those resources. It could be that it's just students generally and not as engaged. There's so many talks and webinars and careers fairs. So it could be it's just even harder to engage students and get them to come along to these things. So yeah, absolutely, just maybe changing marketing or trying different things. You know, the other thing is to remember that there are lots of support and resources and help, but it's a bit of a timing issue. So, you know, Sally, you mentioned, so if you're here and you're coming on a 1-year master's, you need to, at the very, very start of that master's or final year, and need to be thinking about your job search, your applications, you know, your CV. And often, well, it's changed a little, but often international students, they don't do that from the very beginning, because they have this huge juggling act. They're integrating into a UK environment, navigating university life, and adjusting with quite a serious study workload often. So they also are missing out on some of these resources and support, because they're just too overwhelmed to take that on as on top of their studies and part-time work and whatever else. So I think the timing factor is there. I always say to those who've graduated, they always think, oh, I can't go back to my university and ask for this and that. But absolutely, they can, and they should. But that's also an option, you know, even after they finish their studies, to make sure that they're fully using all the resources that are available to them. And then that kind of leads me on to a mentoring program. So I've seen universities are, sorry, Valeria, would you like to add something just before I talk about kind of mentoring?
Sorry about that.
No,
I just
please.
want to jump in and say, to second your point, because international students look for a job on a graduate visa for 2 years, but the access to those resources is lost. The access to the email, access to those tools and licenses, such as assessment tests or mentorship programs. So it would be great if, while the graduate visa is still there for 2 years, if they could keep the access to these resources. I think this is just to second your point. This would be a great thing that universities can provide, because a lot of students, once they graduate, that said, they lose access to careers portal, everything. But the graduate visa still allows them to look for a job. Yeah,
that's a very good point. Thank you. So another really good initiative that I have seen within my organization and our programs is relying on alumni to become mentors, because it's just a lovely virtuous circle. You know, they have been through this process, successfully secured employment, and they want to give back. They want to share their experience. They're excited to kind of talk about their journey, how they did it, how they're getting on in their graduate job, and give back as well. So, you know, really engaging with alumni and having really successful mentoring programs, because an international student can gain so much valuable information and also on a practical level, because if the mentor has, you know, within the last 12 months gone through the recruitment process of various companies, you know, they can really share that quite recent experience and that the practical support, but also the support for them in terms of motivating them, supporting them to say, you know, it is really tough because I have been in exactly the same situation as you. So you will be rejected lots of times. You'll be ghosted by employers. That's another huge issue at the moment. You will face rejections because of your visa status, etc. But don't give up, or try this strategy, or have you thought about this, or it takes time. You know, sometimes the reality is that it just takes time. So leaning on alumni to mentor current students, it's been so incredible for us. It's actually just enhanced the program and made it much easier for these students to go into this, into the job market. And I just wonder how, I obviously universities I know do a lot of engagement, but again, it's the issue is doing it at scale, but potentially, you know, workshops, you know, in person would be great, but virtually where alumni could just really talk about their story and, you know, share their experience and share some practical tips. And then the last point, I'm just conscious I want to have enough time for the last two topics. The last point is cultural awareness and professional communication training, because that is, as Sally, you mentioned, it is so tied in with international students' employability needs. I think without doing that training and doing that work and covering it in some foundation way, they're going to just struggle with the first interview, for example, or you know, even as basic as that, not really understanding how to send somebody a message on LinkedIn in a professional way. So would you like to kind of shed some light on how important cultural awareness and professional communication training really is for international students?
Good.
Sally, would you like to start?
Yeah, I think I've touched on this already, but I mean, to me, this is the most fundamental bridge and hurdle that international students face, and the bridge that we as careers advisors and people supporting international students' employability have to help them understand. I think, as I've already said, I think there is a huge misconception about what international companies are looking for, and a lot has to be done to help international students have a CV that's going to be applicable for international companies who are recruiting here, a CV that actually highlights your strengths and achievements, not just what you've done, a CV that highlights some of those power skills that you've developed through your work experience or your extracurricular activities. I think during the online tests and through the whole recruitment process, international students need to be made aware of what international companies' recruitment criteria. How would you know about those recruitment criteria? Are international students being guided to learn about company values? Because most of the values are the recruitment criteria that international companies use when they're looking for new graduates. And all those skills that international companies are looking for are really embodied in their values. So international students don't really know that they've got to not just look at the job description, but they've got to do a more broader research on understanding that company culture and what they're looking for. So all of this is the sort of cultural divide that I think international students really have to overcome. In the interview process, so many students, you know, try and second guess the questions. They write out all those questions and think, well, if I've got the perfect answer, then I'm going to get through this interview. But actually, because companies are looking at your soft skills, it's not just what you say, it's how you deliver those answers. Can you really deliver them with meaning and to demonstrate your motivation? So I think the whole cultural, cross-cultural understanding really is what international students need to help them through every stage of that recruitment process.
Yeah,
and I could talk a lot more about that as well.
It's a whole separate session that could be done.
Yes,
Hopefully
yes,
this could be a series of more if you're
and this is really why I think, you know, I think we think of ourselves as cross-cultural career coaches, because that's exactly what we're doing. It's not just helping people through the recruitment process, it's actually changing a mindset. At first of all, giving students the confidence in themselves to be able to sell themselves in that recruitment process. And secondly, to be able to understand that, you know, it's not just what you've done, it's who you are that companies are interested in.
Yes. Thank you, Sally. Before I kind of move on to the next topic, Valeria, would you like to add anything?
Just a minor suggestion. When I came to the UK, a lot of universities do very good things, such as international weeks, international welcome programs. And even 10 years ago, University of Nottingham did amazing thing, helping me open a bank account, figure out what SIM card I should get. And they still do it. My sister just started at University of Lancaster. And I can't speak for a lot of universities. Back then, for me, there was no session on career and cultural thing. There was the saying how to do a bank account, how to register with NHS. But I think that the first session, the first week in the UK, I would have loved to get the plan or the action plan for my career and for cultural integration. So here, I know how to, you know, if I get sick, what to do. But if I wanted to stay here for career or integrate, what can I do? So I think that just one of the suggestions for universities is to catch us early, tell us exactly where we can, you know, what should we do in terms of culture, career, but also immigration matters. Where can we go ask for help if something comes up? And I'm saying that different universities do it differently, but it would have been nice to get that service straight away.
Thank you.
Can I just add to that you know, that there are, I mean, a lot of universities are actually relying on external organizations who provide all that advice, who help international students understand, you know, the recruitment process and to get through that. And a lot of universities subscribe to those external organizations that is providing that service, because a lot of them are not providing it themselves.
Thank you. And which I think works really well, because again,
it does. An
external provider can come in and provide something ad hoc, very tailored to the university, filling any gaps that are there. And it could be something very low, you know, talking about cultural awareness, it could be a checklist for students to have on cultural norms, you know, common mistakes international students make when writing an email or a message on LinkedIn, or just a checklist. And then obviously further from that, which would be much more in depth, would be some kind of training or workshop where we can dig a lot deeper. Thank you both. And I'll move on to the next topic. Before I do, I can see a few raised hands. If you wouldn't mind putting any questions or comments in the chat, and I can come back to those towards the end. But thank you. So the third big theme for today's discussion is navigating visa challenges. So this is obviously one of the most important aspects to the journeys of international students wanting to stay in the UK. Huge, you know, uncertainties as well this year, new policies, politically driven as well. So all of this has impacted international students, but it's also impacted their confidence in what they can achieve and what's available to them, their confidence that the UK is still a great place and welcoming place for them. So I think navigating these visa challenges is more important than ever. So I want to also be able to, you know, provide a few strategies to navigate the visa process and discuss the graduate route, because that is under review, as we all know. So let's kind of dive into that. You know, how, if you are on the graduate route visa, you currently just enrolled in university, so you will be on it, how to use it effectively and how to avoid not wasting it, but I call it the graduate route visa trap, which I'll kind of explain a little bit later, but, you know, really diving into this. So I guess questions for the panel. What are the biggest challenges of securing visa-sponsored jobs, or even just more broadly, the biggest challenges for international students that have come to light because of recent visa policy? So, Gina, welcome. I'm sorry you haven't heard from you in the first half, but this would be a good time to hear a bit about your perspective. I know you deal with candidates and applicants as well. What are the biggest challenges that are coming up? What are the fears around new policy?
So let me just start off by saying, I think the most important thing that I have grasped from listening in as an outsider to the three of you speaking is just how important it is and really vital that you started off this panel by talking about humanizing the experience. And because I see it as well when I advise from my side, is a lot of individuals feel othered by the whole process and the whole system, and the story that Valeria mentioned, or her own experience, is something that happens. It does happen. And so it was just, yeah, thank you, Annika, for starting off by just humanizing the whole experience. If I can start off on a positive note, actually the changes that came about from December 2020, so after the UK's exit from the EU, actually made the idea of sponsorship something that employers were thinking about more. And it was something that they were less hostile to, because there was seen as a greater need for it now that the free movement had come to an end and systems of the EU were subject to the immigration system that the rest of the world had been subject to at that point. So I think that from a positive note, at least from employers, so from my employer clients, they were they've looked into it in a bit more detail, they were aware of it and less cautious of embarking on getting a sponsorship license, because they saw that there was a greater need for it than there was before. And in terms of the most recent policy changes and most recent announcements, have been driven by the 5-point plan to reduce the net migration figures. And so the biggest announcement and the biggest change has been in relation to the salaries, the minimum salary requirements for those on the skilled worker route. And so what we're seeing is that employers are having to think about the prospect of sponsoring carefully. They're having to review and look at those who are sponsored at the moment, because the route that they're on, if they're on a new entrant route, if they need to extend their visa, they want to keep the employee working there for longer towards them getting their permanent residence or indefinitely to remain. When they make their next visa application, they're likely going to need a pay rise. And depending on what role they are employed in, it could be a very significant one. And some employers are having to go through who they have employed at the moment, who's sponsored, and seeing what the strategy is going to be in the long term. How are they going to affect those pay rises? How are they going to deal with recruitment going forward, given that they will have to review the salary scales that they've been offering so far? So those are the two most significant changes.
Thank you, Gina. And it's a real disruption for employers and for their recruitment strategy. You know, it's been so disruptive, and companies are withdrawing offers because of the new policy. It feels like a kind of everybody is losing situation. Employers are losing out on talent, but they're also then having to withdraw offers, scrambling around trying to fill those places. It will impact their pipeline. It will impact their diversity targets as well. On so many levels, the employer is losing, they have to comply. So they don't have a choice, you know, if they have to, you know, offer a certain salary, then that's what they have to do. International students and graduates applying, they're losing out as well. It's such a shame, because I just envisage a situation where, because of these higher salary thresholds, you're going to get the majority then of international graduates ending up in, I don't know, London-based jobs, or certain sectors, because they are, you know, higher paid. That's no good for anybody. It's not good for graduate mobility. It's no good for you know, sectors that desperately need international talent, that are unable now to offer them roles at that higher salary. Gina, I know this has just recently been put into place. Do you think that there's any movement on the minimum salary threshold? Do you think there'll be any change in this policy, or any review of this anytime soon?
So what we have, so the changes that we've seen, there have been, it's been a drastic change. I mean, everything's changed, so much so that even the way that we identify and classify codes for the different roles, it's totally changed. So another thing employers need to watch out for is, if they've been recruiting similar sort of roles for the past 10 years or so, they need to be aware that they can't just take up the same SOC code that they used last time and repeat it, because they probably won't be the same code. So quite a lot has changed in such a short space of time, so much so that even some of the IT systems, the immigration forms, haven't yet kept up with that change. So this has been a drastic change. So I mean, who knows? You can never tell. You never know. I don't see it changing anytime soon. I think those minimum salary thresholds are what we have. I don't know if there's going to be any movement in terms of, I mean, it's changed so much, and so much so that the idea was there was a shortage occupation list, for example, which listed all the jobs which were, there was a national shortage, and so there's a justification that employers could discount them, the salaries paid for those roles, and then the most commonly used for graduate roles was for software engineers, so software developers. And so most of those kind of graduate roles are no longer on the shortage occupation list. They've gone. So that means that someone who was, you know, if a company was recruiting workers on those roles, if they're recruiting somebody now, they have to pay them something, I think it's about 86% more than they were before. So you could get away with paying a software developer $27,700 based on the old rules. If you were to employ them now, you've got to pay them $49,400, and you can't discount them on the individual roles. You can only offer discounts to jobs where they're going to be paid less, the going rate less than 20,960. Getting a bit too technical.
Yeah.
But so much so has changed in the way they think about it. So it's a big shift in policy change. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think we're going to get any salary threshold. I don't think we're going to get anything that puts us in a position that we were before. But yes, you're very right. It is going to be skewed heavily in favour of you know, international students or international overseas workers working in London and South East, and also public sector roles. So roles in education and health and care are subject to different salary scales, so they can pay lower salaries. So again, it's private or private sector employers are going to have to be paying a lot of money to recruit overseas staff, whether in those kind of roles, but whether if you're working in health or education, then your employer can pay you less. And those are largely public sector roles. So I don't know what the future holds. You never know. But yeah, the whole rationale, the whole policy shift has been so big and huge. I don't see it changing anytime soon, not just the drastic ways it has.
Thank you, Gina. That's very helpful. Valeria or Sally, is there anything that you would like to add before we talk about the graduate route?
I would just say that, you know, I've had at least 4 of my own students have their jobs rescinded because of the visa changes. And these were people who've been through the whole graduate recruitment process. They were due to start in September, and the companies have now withdrawn those offers. And I think about being heavily weighted in London. I mean, you take one of, you know, the big 4, they're now, I mean, one of those companies actually states on their website that they will only offer visa sponsorship for roles in Luton, Reading, and London. So it really, really, really narrows down the options. And there's another big firm who often recruits a lot of international students. They've actually stopped recruiting international students completely. They're not offering any more visa sponsorship roles. So it is very, very much impacting the job market for international students. And I just try and pull on some positives like the new entrant route. But, you know, as Gina's just pointed out, that's all very well for the first 2 years, but that's not going to support somebody through 5 years of a graduate training program and a job thereafter. So I don't like to be, I'm somebody who's a very positive thinker, but I'm finding it hard to pull some positives on in the current situation.
Thank you, Sally.
I completely second that I think that the hardest thing is a transition here. I mean, maybe some companies like big sponsors that Sally have mentioned will catch up and revise the policies, but time for many students, time is key. And by the time employers will figure out that there is a new entrant rule, how's it going to manage the new entrant rule, how's it going to manage the salary levels? Unfortunately, precious time is going away for many candidates. That's really, really sad because timing is key, what you, Annika, have mentioned in the beginning. And the transition is going to take time because new entrant rules that international students are benefiting comparing to other immigrants that are coming to the UK. A lot of companies not aware and they don't know how to use it because of the 4-year threshold that there is and how it applies. So all we can do is educate ourselves as candidates and people that work with international students and help international students leverage that small discounts, small advantages to the case as much as possible. But it's hard to negotiate, very hard.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Gina. I mean, the new entrant rule isn't new, is it? It was in before. It's just the leap between the new entrant salary and the minimum salary is much greater than it was before. Precisely. I might be wrong on that.
Yeah, no, you are correct. Yeah.
Which makes it even more difficult, as you pointed out.
Yeah. Thank you. And then lastly, just to talk about the graduate route visa, because obviously it's under review and discussions like this, you know, can help to form, you know, opinion, and it's good to discuss it because for me, I think, you know, it's an advantage, it's time, it takes the pressure off, but that's all dependent on how an international graduate uses their time, their perception of the graduate route visa as well. They're kind of, there's a bit of sometimes of a misconception that it's going to lead them into a job magically, or I call it the graduate route visa trap, where I hear from every single week from so many students, I'm working for this company, they said they might sponsor me, or I haven't raised it with them, but I'm just hoping, but if I've been with them for 2 years and they really like me, by the end of it, I'm going to be sponsored by them. And my response is that that's a risky strategy. And is there a way if you have had that conversation, to formalize that conversation, put it in a contract, put it in writing, something that gives you some security that there's going to be a sponsorship at the end of that 2-year period. Because otherwise, and I've seen it, and again, this is piling on even more pressure to this community, pressure on these graduates to perform, to work, do above and beyond for that company, to never ask for days off, to feel like they can't even take a sick day, so what the graduate route visa ends up being is a kind of probation period for the employer to, I don't want to use exploit, but I'm struggling to think of another word here, to take advantage of their situation, knowing that they're kind of stuck and are just hoping and praying that they're going to get a permanent job at the end of their 2 years. So it'd be great to get your thoughts on this. Do you think the graduate route visa actually does help improve international students' chances of securing sponsored jobs, or does it actually hinder their chances?
I'm happy to jump in. I think both ways. I think it buys time for international students, so they're not in such a rush. They can actually then maybe have a second bite of the cherry if they've already applied for jobs at the start of their, let's say, their undergraduate, at the start of their last year, their undergraduate studies, or at the start of their master's year, they haven't been successful. Then it gives them another opportunity, or even 2 more opportunities, to apply again for graduate training programs where previously, anyhow, at least there was greater chances of getting visa sponsorship. So I think it does help buy time. I think students who do get a job under the PSW visa really need to go into that with their eyes wide open because of the pitfalls that you've just highlighted, Annika. And I normally try and advise students to talk right at the beginning about once they're employed and maybe they've had a probation period of 3 months, or even right at the start, to see whether they're going to sponsor the visa longer term. Otherwise, at least you can earn some money and use that then as a platform to apply for other jobs where you are perhaps more certain of gaining visa sponsorship. But just to work for 2 years blindly and hope that that's going to lead to visa sponsorship at the end, I think, is, as you say, is a mistake. There's just one other point I want to add, and that is, I'm not sure all companies really have grasped the PSW visa and what it means. And there are some companies, some very well-known companies, who won't even accept applicants on a PSW visa. They'll only accept applicants who are still on a student tier 4 visa. So I do think there's misunderstandings, and I do think there are pitfalls. I agree.
Thank you, Sally.
I wanted to support Sally's opinion. I completely agree that it's more of a positive for me, as someone who didn't have a chance to have a graduate visa. I feel that time is key for many international students. Obviously, how they use it, that's a different aspect. And yes, there are risks. People are going to take advantage of you, as Annika have mentioned, and some people don't know how to use it wisely for many different reasons. But I still think this is I love the UK, and I'm the biggest fan, from not being a British citizen, of the UK. I think I've been promoting it before I even joined and moved to the UK. But I feel that if the graduate route is going to be cancelled, it's going to be very hard for people to advocate for the UK and for UK education, just because, okay, if you're coming to study the UK, maybe the sponsorship is not going to happen. This doesn't end there, right? This is not the end of the world, even though this is what I promote. International student, not everyone's going to get a sponsored job, unfortunately, for many different reasons. And at least you get the graduate route to get the experience, to get the cultural understanding, to get the whole of experience what it is like to study in the UK and work in the UK. So I feel that it does improve the chances. It's still more of a benefit than a risk, but the students shouldn't be relying on it. And if their long-term goal is to get a job in the UK, they don't have to go on a graduate visa even. Especially if they're bachelor students, they have more time here. But it's a great benefit to have. Expensive benefit for some, because you do have to pay £2,000 to get on this visa. But it's still really hopeful. Completely agree with Sally that unfortunately employers lack understanding, and this is for the candidates and for universities as well to advocate. So maybe Gina has more to add in immigration perspective.
Yes, I was going to comment and say, from what I found, of course, I can only speak of those employers that know about the route, and that's why they instruct me. But from the employer side of things, I think that the graduate route gives them the opportunity to assess the candidate and see if they're going to invest in the candidate. I've only seen the positive outcomes, of course, because I was assisted with the applications, but it allows them the time to assess their candidate and see how well they fit in before they venture on the cost of investing in the fees that come with sponsoring a worker. So from that point, I have heard positive things from employers. It does give them a chance. And when they do, from a strategic point of view, that they've identified the person as the right fit, would be to make the switch as soon as possible, because the sponsorship fees only increase, and so do the requirements of salary and all of that. So if you can, as an employer, make a decision as to whether you're going to offer this person a long, permanent position and sponsor them, is make that decision sooner rather than later. Because if you wait out for the 2 years, fees might have gone up drastically to sponsor the worker, and also there might be some more salary thresholds or more requirements that are difficult to meet.
Thank you, Gina. And again, for the purpose of not wanting to run out of time, I'm moving on to the fourth and final topic now, which is, I think, really important. So supporting UK employers. So really understanding that they face lots of challenges and lack of knowledge, fears around sponsorship as well. And then obviously navigating the impact of recent policy changes. It's really impacted many employers. So it'd be good to help propose some strategies for starting and successfully managing the sponsorship process, breaking it down, and also just highlighting the benefits again of hiring international talent and the positive impact that they have on the workplace, on diversity and so many other areas. I know, Gina, you've kindly put together a checklist for employers, so this will be shared after the session with all of those people who have registered for this discussion today. Gina, in your opinion, what do you think are the biggest challenges faced by UK employers around visa sponsorship?
So I think the most challenging aspect is actually the guidance and the rules. They're this dense and they change so frequently with such little notice that it's really difficult for employers to keep on top of things. And there is probably going to be a bigger drive towards compliance checks and auditing sponsors to make sure that they're complying with the policy guidance more so than there was before, just because there are so many sponsors right now out there, and it's in the news a lot. So they might, there's probably going to be a bigger shift towards compliance. It's very burdensome. It is, and there's a lot of red tape, and things aren't made easier by them changing all the time. So I think that's one of the main headaches for employers. The other thing, of course, is costs. The cost of sponsorship have more or less stayed the same in terms of the fees which the sponsor has to pay directly related to their license. But in terms of the visa application fees, particularly the immigration health surcharge, I mean, that has gone up from £624 per year to £1,035. So an employer sponsoring a worker on a 5-year visa would have to fork out 175, I think that is, and that's for that one applicant, just for the health surcharge. So depending on how many how many workers they're going to recruit and how big the company is, that is a lot. That isn't on top of the other sponsorship fees which they have to pay. So I think the most challenging aspect of this for them is the rules and how frequently they change, and also the fees. And also, I would say as well, another aspect is the uncertainty. So they can plan for now, but there's the uncertainty of what does the future hold, and it is a long-term investment as far as they're concerned, and those are the challenges that they face.
Thanks, Gina. And I just wanted to understand from you, because I also want to impart some positivity for employers who might be thinking about sponsoring. We've discussed this before, you and I, but post Brexit, there was a lot of new employers applying for the license, and I think it's record numbers now. And actually, just from my own experience in the last couple of years, so many more employers are offering sponsorship and are willing to sponsor, and it's really encouraging and very positive. So how would you say things have become easier for employers to sponsor? I think you mentioned things in the past about there's not as many restrictions on them, so like not a cap on numbers. So would you like to just kind of summarize some of the positives and ways that the process has become easier?
So the biggest change was the ending of free movement, which meant that the sponsorship license system had to adapt to that. And so the major change was the removing of the resident labour market test. So before December 2020, if you wanted to employ somebody from overseas, in most cases, unless the job was on a shortage occupation list, you'd have to show that you advertised it in a prescribed format, depending on what the role was, and for a certain number of days, and it was 28 days, and you could only then sponsor your overseas candidate if you had shown that that recruitment campaign had failed and you hadn't been able to get any suitable candidates for the role from the resident labour market. So that was a huge change, which meant that burden was gone. You could go and recruit workers remote who need sponsorship. Another major change was before then there was a cap on the actual number of overseas visa applications that could be made under the then Tier 2 route that could be made in a year. And there were times when there were particular acute shortages in the NHS, so a lot of doctors were getting recruited, a lot of nurses were getting recruited, and they were used, the cap was getting used up. Every month there would be a meeting, and the board would have to decide how many we're going to approve this month. And if you miss that month, you have to wait and apply for next month. That's gone. So those are the two main changes that have pushed then the increase in sponsor license applications and their sponsored employees. That's probably as a result of us leaving the EU.
Thanks, Gina. And I know it is as part of your work, you help employers to navigate the process and be compliant. What would you say the biggest motivations for those employers are for wanting to actively apply for the license and hire those from overseas?
for reasons of diversity, so making sure that they have access to the best talent, and that they're not restricted on recruitment because of somebody's immigration status or their geographic location. They can they can hire the best candidate for the job. And as I think I mentioned right at the beginning, that the change in the UK immigration policy after exiting the EU has meant that a lot more employers are actually willing to think about sponsorship, aren't so cautious of it, and we're almost afraid, particularly the smaller firms, of actually even embarking on or going on that because there's some it's not for us. We don't offer sponsorship. We don't do that. It's, you know, we're too small. We can't do it. So I guess by forced by the need, a greater need for it. There are a lot more sponsors now than there were before. So I guess in terms of the international students, it means that there's a lot more companies that are able to sponsor them if they have a sponsorship license. Willing's different, but yeah, I guess they are able to.
Thank you, Gina. Valeria, would you like to add anything around we talked about obviously the benefits, there's so many benefits of hiring international student, impact on diversity. Would you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
For employers, you mean what's the benefit for employers to
For
hire?
employers, yeah, absolutely.
I think that I'm sure that if there is data on attrition and how the job hopping or how many years the average employee stays in the role compared to, if we compare local students to international, I'm sure this would be lower for international students just because they're more dedicated and they have less flexibility, which means they're more dedicated for the employer, because at the end of the day, they're sponsored by employer to be in the UK. That's the reason why they're in the UK in the first place. So I feel that the tenure, how much they value being in the company, how they contribute outside the work is higher. This is just my assumption based on people I work with. And I work with clients that are British citizens or have right to work without sponsorship as well. And I have friends and graduates in my network. I just see that the job hopping is lower for international students, I think for many different reasons. And that's something that employers should appreciate. That yes, it might be more expensive, but how much money you'll be spending looking for a new employee that might be more might be more flexible to move just because of compensation, maybe a few grand, a new title, because that could be more important for them as for immigration stability that is some international students are looking for. Secondly, of course, if you're a multinational company, and you're not hiring a multinational talent, you are not as diverse as you're talking about. And I think that having worked for a multinational company, I realized how important it is to bring the diverse skill set and how valued it is. I didn't feel that my skill set were as valued when I was looking for a job, but once I've joined a company, I realized how valuable they are. And that people told me, wow, you speak another language, wow, you worked in Middle East, wow, you do this. And I felt like, wow, I wish I knew how great those things were. So I think that benefit of higher international students could be the language skills, adaptability, be able to talk with clients, because clients are not usually just British citizens, they also around the world. And again, the costs and benefit is very, very good in terms of ratio if you think about those things that international students are bringing. And hopefully employers will realize that. But it's also a cultural thing of the company. I tell my clients, if the company doesn't want to sponsor and they don't want to work with Gina, for example, to get the license or get the sponsorship, which is actually very easy if you do it right, then probably it's not the right company for you as well, because they might be short-sighted or very, very cost-orientated, which might not be a great development place for international talent.
Thank you, Valeria. And you made such a good point. International graduates value the stability. So when they secure a job with visa sponsorship, they're almost kind of, I always explain it in this way, but they enter into a marriage with that company. They're so closely bonded, and they want to be there. They want to be there for a long-term period, at least for the 5 years until they get their permanent residency, which is the kind of the golden ticket. And then if you think about from an employer's perspective, if you spent, I don't know, 2 years training somebody on a graduate scheme, really spending quite a significant amount of resource training a graduate who then maybe after the 2 years after their grad scheme, for example, 2 or 3 years, they then leave for another role, then it's all of that training cost and recruiting somebody else and ensuring they've got the talent pipeline, and that's critical because that's a huge issue for employers. It's retention. So our team are graduate recruiters, and they're focused obviously at the very beginning, which is early careers, so making sure that they're filling their graduate roles, but they also do a lot of work based around retention. So once they've done all that, good marketing, good recruiting, they've got amazing graduates in the door, training them, integrating them, then their biggest challenge next is, well, how to keep them? How can we retain these people? And I think that's less of an issue with internationals because they value that stability and are much more loyal to the company. And yeah, then there's lots of other benefits that you mentioned as well, which is tangible skills like language skills, but also these qualities that they have, which is adaptability, being very self-disciplined, independent, resilient, having all these other qualities that make them an incredible community to hire and work with. So that concludes the panel discussion, and I'm only 1 minute over, which is very impressive. So I'm quite proud. I've been keeping an eye on the clock. I'm very aware that people have to leave. So before finishing, I just wanted to kind of summarize and give some final thoughts. So this panel discussion was just focused on these 4 topics. I would like to do follow-up sessions and follow-up discussions which can unpick some of these topics in even more detail, and I think discussions like these are important for different stakeholders. I mentioned the different ways people can benefit from discussions like this, but really it kind of boils down to, and I'm realizing it more and more, it's not just sort of working with one side. It's also helping the international student as well as the employer as well as careers teams at university. So it's really looking at the ecosystem and trying to figure out ways to help support international students with their onward careers and improve their employability outcomes. And I think the best way, as highlighted by this really insightful panel event, is collaboration. So collaborating with others in various fields who can share insights and strategies and boost employability outcomes, because essentially that's what we're all working towards. Before I end, Gina, do you have any final thoughts that you would just like to summarize? Some more positivity, and then I'll ask Valeria as well. But Gina, did you have anything that you wanted to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, just to pick up on something that Valeria said. She mentioned that if there's a candidate who's looking for sponsorship and the firm doesn't want to sponsorship, because sponsors, I think it's difficult, whatever. And she mentioned something that's really important. She said, it's easy if you know how. And so my advice would be, whether you are a student, a recent graduate, or you're an employer, and you're faced with the idea of sponsorship or making a skilled worker visa application, is read about it, research, and then if you need it, get advice. Because it is actually not that difficult if you only know, if you know how to do it, or you know where to ask to get the right advice. It is possible. And I think the most daunting thing, whether you're an applicant or whether you're an employer of business, is just the density of the information that's there. That's not always clear, and sometimes conflicting. What you see on the website is not what you see somewhere else, not what you see in the guidance. So my advice would be to do your research and make sure that you understand as much as you can, and then get advice if you need it.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. It's easy if you know how. It's easy if you know how.
Thank you, Annika and Gina and Sally, for this session. I've learned a lot myself, so I'm sure that the whole audience found it useful. And I want to second what Gina have said. It's easy if you know how, and applies also for universities. If they want to help international students, it's easy if they do revise the strategies all the time. It's easy for us to teach if we put the effort and always upgrade our knowledge and do the sessions with universities, employers, and immigration advisors. And the same if you're international students, if you have the access to information, free, paid, any that you can get, once you figure it out and do the research, I'm sure that you can land a job in the UK with a sponsorship, and we're here to support anyone from whatever part or journey you're coming to help international students, if you're a stakeholder or international student yourself. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Valeria, and thank you both for joining me. And Sally had to leave to make another meeting, but really appreciate the insights from all of you. And I will probably be holding another session like this later in the year, and I would love to have you back. But in the meantime, after this, everybody who is registered or attended live will receive the full recording and the slides. If there are questions, I'm sure there are, but we've run out of time. Please don't hesitate to reach out on LinkedIn or send us an email, with your questions. But thank you so much. I've learned a lot. It's been very interesting. And to both of you and everybody here, enjoy the rest of this sunny day.
Everyone, thank you.
Take care. Bye.